The NFL season is fast approaching, with many fans wondering whether their team has what it takes to compete. Teams like the Patriots, Panthers, or even Giants know this is the year where it's all about rebuilding through the draft. However, there are four specific teams where factors like high odds to win the Super Bowl, finances, analyst predictions put these teams in a rough situation. I wanted to break down my reasons for picking these four specific teams and why I think we should pump the brakes going forward. So let's outline the criteria used to compile this list. Teams like the Panthers, Patriots, Giants are going to be excluded because nobody's expecting them to overperform. An argument can be made for or against these teams meeting or exceeding the win projections that I have in mind. And finally, one team per division. Otherwise, I could do an entire video about the NFC East, and quite frankly, that would be boring. We'll start with the team that's least concerning and then work our way to the top. So with that said, let's get started with pick number 5. And I think this is the team that's going to be the most concerning in the long run, and that's going to be the New Orleans Saints. You might look at the stats for the New Orleans Saints and be like, what are you talking about? They're going to be fine. But that's the thing. Nothing is worse than being mediocre in sports. Ever since Drew Brees retired, the Saints have been a near 500 team with a 25-26 record. Once you factor in Dennis Allen's record, they're 16-18 since he's been the head coach, and last year had a 1-5 record against playoff teams. I can't think of a more poetic way to summarize the franchise of the New Orleans Saints than on the very first play of last season. It was a kick return and it looked promising for Raheem Shaheed, only to fumble the ball moments later. Derek Carr is a great representation of this team. He can't run, but evens it out with his accuracy and reliable passing game. He looks promising in the regular season, but then struggles to lead his team to the playoffs. The Saints were tied for the oldest team in the NFL last season, with Carr being 33, which was tied for the third oldest on the team alongside fellow quarterback and tight end Taysom Hill. The 4-time Pro Bowler had a rocky start with his new team. He was forcing passes to teammates that resulted in pick sixes. That second game against the Panthers was especially rough, as Carr finished with a pass rating of 58%. Saints fans went to Twitter asking for Carr to be replaced with Jameis Winston. So suffice to say, with the departure of Jameis Winston to the Cleveland Browns, the pressure is on Carr now more than ever to lead the Saints to a playoff berth. After that shoulder injury Carr sustained during the Week 3 game against the Packers, it appeared like Carr was playing it safe. Rather than scrambling in the pocket to throw a long ball, he instead opted to use a check down pass and get rid of the ball as soon as possible. Honestly, I don't blame him. It's hard to feel loose and confident where you are forced to leave the game early 3 different times. His offensive line did him no favors thanks to the underwhelming performances. Right tackle Ryan Ramczyk is officially out for the season due to his lingering knee injury since last winter. So now you have 3 new offensive linemen, including rookie tackle Talise Fuaga, who I do think could be their version of Andrew Thomas. But what concerns me is the shuffling of the O-line, moving guys like Trevor Penning from left tackle to right guard, and then at the same time, veterans can't really help the younger, inexperienced guys because they aren't familiar with Kubiak's playbook. And I just want to make a side note here. It's about time Clint Kubiak replaced Pete Carmichael, because the last time Pete Carmichael's out-of-date, irreverent playbook was actually effective against opponents, people used to think that wearing baggy cargo shorts in Cancun was a good idea. Now let's talk about the running back rotation. In 2022, Jamal Williams scored 17 touchdowns with the Lions, but last season he got beat in touchdowns and rushing yards to Taysom Hill while doing so on less carries. Alvin Kamara played a career-low 14 games with a suspension and an ankle injury. I bring up this injury because Kamara is almost 30, and running backs typically don't play past their early 30s due to the physically demanding strains of the game. According to Draft Sharks, Kamara is listed as a very high-risk injury player due to his prolonged history with getting injured. If you look at his career stats, Kamara has regressed in average rushing yards and receptions. I haven't mentioned Chris Olave yet because I'm not concerned with his performance, more so his off-the-field antics. In October of last year, Olave was arrested after going 70 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. This marks the second time Olave was charged with reckless operation of a motor vehicle. If the Saints want to be able to compete, they need Olave to be on the field. With 2 years of 1,000-yard receptions under his belt, he could easily become a top 5 receiver in this league. Now what about the defense? There's linebacker Demario Davis, top 30 in total tackles. Defensive end Carl Granderson, tied for 33rd in sacks. Now you have Chase Young on a 1-year deal. Even though the rushing yards allowed per game did improve from the previous season, there still is room for improvement. To summarize the Saints' woes in a nutshell, I'm just going to refer to this Redditor's post. Quote, in Week 10, they were down 3-27 to the Vikings due to the fact that this defense is as effective at stopping running back QBs as a demented old man trying to stop pickup truck that's rushing down the highway at 200 miles per hour with his bare hands. The Saints will be facing dual-threat quarterbacks like Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield. So hopefully a 4-3 defensive blitz is used to force more passes. That way the QB has to throw in the direction of guys like Matthew, a top 10 recipient in interceptions last year, or even new DB Kool-Aid McKinstry, who is top 2 in pass deflections for Alabama in both 2022 and 2023. The Saints allowed more passing yards per game than the division rivals Falcons or even the Panthers. Pro Football Network, Sports Illustrated are saying anywhere from 7 to 10 wins. And I'm not going to do that because I think 6 to 8 wins is more realistic, just missing out on a playoff spot from the Falcons and the Bucs. Just because I'm concerned with the Saints doesn't mean I think that they'll be a bad team. They're the benchmark of being mediocre. And if you need any more proof, look at the salary cap when it comes to guys like Shaheed and Olave when it's time to get paid. And then look at the fact that Marshawn Lattimore is making over $30 million a year. So next up is what I consider to be the most injury-prone team in the NFL and actually the most volatile team in the NFL, and that's the Buffalo Bills. Curtis Samuel is a much-needed veteran presence. He's able to hold on to the ball, and he has more red zone targets than Gabe Davis or even Devontae Adams. I also like the fact that he worked with offensive coordinator Joe Brady with the Carolina Panthers, but here's where the issues come into play for me. Almost 40% of Josh Allen's throws last season went either to Diggs or Gabe Davis. Wide receiver Khalil Shakir was clutch. He did score a touchdown in both playoff games against Steelers and Chiefs. But if Shakir now lines up in the slot, that inside's going to get clogged, which makes it harder to run in the backfield. For the offensive line, the Bills are last in sacks, and yet they're one of the worst in pocket time. When you need Josh Allen to run, deke, and drop the shoulder, it's only a matter of time before his body gets compromised. Keon Coleman is a quick, elusive receiver who could be in for a breakout season. But to put the pressure on a 21-year-old who isn't used to playing in the snowy environments and have him immediately step in to be a wide receiver too is asking for a lot. As for the non-offensive rookies, Dawson Knox on the IR after breaking his wrist, he only managed 20 or more receiving yards in only a third of his remaining games after coming back. At pass-first offense, now more than ever, the receivers need to step up and help Allen drive down the field. And yes, I do know Dalton Kincaid is there to alleviate some of the tension for the tight end position, but going back to Knox, he's going to get passes. He's going to be doing stiff arms. He's going to be blocking on the line. And the wrist is so intricate when it comes to the different muscles that he's going to be required to put a lot of strain on those muscles. So there's a chance that he's just going to be able to be okay, but underwhelming. He's not going to be able to reach those 2021 stats that he was able to accomplish. And keep in mind too, when he did break his wrist, it wasn't like he was on the sidelines with the cast. He actually had to go for surgery. The NFL is very much a next man up business to where a player must avoid constant injuries in order to get cut from the roster. And this is something that I actually worry about for Dawson Knox. But then you have Pro Bowl running back James Cook, who did admittedly have an impressive season last year. Ever since Brady took over as the offensive coordinator, Cook became the RB11 in fantasy, averaging over 19 touches, over 100 total yards per game. However, he does have some fumble concerns, coming second only behind Allen, and he does miss some wide open passes, like the drop pass against the Chiefs in the playoffs. At weeks 11 to 18, Cook played more than 60% of the snaps only twice. All that's to say, Cook does have the potential to be a great running back for years to come. But the fundamentals still need refining, and he's unproven at being the bell cow of this franchise. Defensive losses like Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Leonard Floyd, Jordan Poyer, they do all add up. Yes, you have veterans like Rasul Douglas holding it down, but at the same time, I'm not even mentioning the guys that are still on the team who are hurt right now, whether it's DaQuan Jones, Matt Milano, Von Miller. All of those guys are standout players for the Bills and what makes the Bills defense so iconic. So to see them out really impacts the overall performance. As a whole, the Bills defense is old, and in terms of the defensive secondary, they're just a rotating carousel. The pressure is on for the Bills defense to stay healthy, as Bills Mafia, arguably the most loyal fan base in any sport, paid $850 million to build that new stadium. Right now, the Bills have the 7th best odds to win the Super Bowl according to BetMGM. If the offense has to continuously fight back to score, it'll force Allen to make those reckless plays that could cost the Bills a game. But how safe is his run game going to be when he's constantly putting himself in harm's way? I do like that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are returning. Keeping the 3-time Pro Bowler Deion Dawkins healthy is especially important for protecting Allen. I think it'll be such a big step down for the Bills that the media will start to go into a frenzy because they haven't been used to seeing this for several years. I could see the Bills winning anywhere from about 5 to 7 wins. From the most concerning team in the short term, I'm going to move on to the most underwhelming team this year, and that will be the Tennessee Titans. In 2024, the team picked up a new executive VP/general manager in Rand Carthen. The Titans are putting a lot of trust in an executive who has the experience but lacks the resume of achievements. Now you have a new head coach in Brian Callahan, having spent 5 years developing Joe Burrow's game as the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. With 2 years of AFC Championship experience and a Super Bowl berth under his belt, he did help the Bengals become a unit. This is going to create a nice father-son duo with Bill Callahan being the new offensive line coach. This is coming from being the offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns, and he was responsible for having the best running average since 1966 and the 3rd highest rushing total in the franchise's history. Additionally, former offensive coordinator for the Jaguars, Nick Holtz, is coming on board. Similar to Curtis Samuel, Holtz reunites with his star receiver. Calvin Ridley had over 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns under his guidance. Finally, defensive coordinator Denard Wilson is a great hire. Last year, he was in the same role with the Ravens, and if you look at his stats, the potential is so high. If you look at what he did with Kyle Hamilton, bringing out the best in him, helping him to not only earn his first Pro Bowl, but All-Pro as well. I do think that Will Levis will be much better than Ryan Tannehill, but at the same time, there's a lot of expectation for Will Levis to step up. I think that he has a great arm, and throwing for almost 2,000 yards in 9 games last year with that lackluster receiving core is incredibly impressive. So why am I concerned about this? I think the Titans are a team where their offense brings down the entire team. Their defense is fine at best, but their offense is so horrific if you look at the statistics that it actually is concerning going into this season. And then you look at their division in the AFC South. You have the Houston Texans with that high-powered offense. You have the Indianapolis Colts, who were missing their quarterback, Anthony Richardson, last season, but yet narrowly missed a playoff berth. And then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were 10th best in rushing yards allowed. On 25 carries, Levis ran for only 57 yards and was almost in the top 20 for fumbles, despite only playing those 9 games. Also, he was sacked 28 times. According to Pro Football Focus, Levis was working with arguably, quote, the worst offensive line. It's ranked 28th in possession time, 6th in penalties, and the worst in pressures. Although drafting J.C. Latham could be a great addition for them, it's still unproven. Now comes Tony Pollard, who's at his full potential when he's part of a running back committee and not the bell cow. But as a result, that's going to limit the amount of touches he receives. Although I see the potential, I could also see the tandem running back situation that was similar in Buffalo with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Another reason why I think Pollard is overvalued is the strength of the Cowboys' offensive line is vastly superior to the Titans. And then let's just talk about the duo and DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks. Starting off the season as a 32-year-old with an injury is never a good thing, especially as a wide receiver. And then you have Treylon Burks, who this is very much a make or break year for him. Ever since joining the draft in 2022, Burks has less than 50 receptions, only 1 touchdown. So if there was ever a year where Burks really needs to step up as that wide receiver too, this is the year. But to wrap up all of my overall thoughts, what was the point in signing Mason Rudolph to a $2.8 million contract when you already have Malik Willis? And if you don't believe in Malik Willis, why didn't you try to trade him? That money could have went towards putting an offer down for right tackle Mike Onwenu and free agency, but they didn't do that. Some were calling the Titans the most slept-on team this year, and I even saw an analyst for CBS Sports thinking that they could exceed the expectations that they have going into this year. The Moneyline's odds have the Titans with 7 wins, but after looking at that team's schedule and knowing how weak their offense is, at most, I see 5 wins. And then for the final team on this list, I am the most concerned about them, but I think that they're going to do better than the Titans when it comes to their standings. I think that they're very concerning because if you look at everything new that's going on for them this year and how they performed last year, that is such an uphill battle that trying to put myself in their shoes is just so stressful. But with all that teasing going on, here's why I think the Washington Commanders are under the most pressure this year to perform. Professional sports is very much a what have you done for me lately industry, with football being the one sport out of the 4 major ones that you need to perform the fastest. If you look at the several changes that the Commanders are facing this season, it's ridiculous. Rather than just tell you all the new changes going on, how about if I just show you? And that seems like a lot, right? So how were they last year, statistically speaking? And if there is one player I think is under the most pressure this year, I think it's Jaden Daniels. I'm a Giants fan, and yet I still want Jaden Daniels to perform. I want him to have that Hall of Fame career because if you watch Hard Knocks and you see how he interacted with Brian Daboll, you know that he's a smart kid. He's athletic. He's going to be able to win you the games as a leader. And that's why Brian Daboll wanted him so badly in that draft. But at the same time, I can't help but think of all the comparisons to RG3 and what he went through in his first year. If you see the comparison, winning the Heisman, who gets drafted 2nd overall by Washington, there are so many similarities, even in terms of the fact that they're great dual threat quarterbacks. And then what makes it worse is that he has to perform right away. You look at guys like Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, they had time to learn from their mentors and make mistakes and then grow from them. But with Jaden Daniels, he has no time. And then he's in the NFC East. That is the most publicized division in the NFL. That is under a constant microscope. So to be the runt of the family in Washington and having to always be talked about all the time, wondering whether or not you're a bust or not, is very stressful for someone that's barely over 20. And then the cherry on top, his first primetime game is week 3 against the Bengals. There's definitely an argument to be made with the signing of Cliff Kingsbury, working alongside Caleb Williams at USC. He was responsible, him and his offense were responsible for more first down passes than opponents, more touchdowns on offense, less time of possession, and even a higher rate of success with red zone touchdowns. But there's something else to note too. You're losing valuable tight end position from Logan Thomas with the downgrade to Zach Ertz. I don't feel like Johan Dotson has shown the potential and thus really needs to step up to become that wide receiver too. I don't think he's bad per se. I just think that he hasn't been able to really show what he's able of accomplishing. And this is going to be the season where he really needs to help out Jaden Daniels for the sake of making that offense somewhat salvageable. And then the signing of Austin Eckler, that was kind of confusing because if you look at his receptions, touchdowns, overall performance, it was slightly underwhelming last year. You know it's bad when the NFL YouTube page stops posting your yearly highlights and instead just combines your best plays from the years prior. It got to a point where even fantasy football owners were telling you to just drop him from your league. I am interested in seeing how Eckler will be on the kickoff returns, and it could be a way to really emphasize his strength and acceleration. To wrap up all the negative thoughts I have around the Commanders, I want to talk about Emmanuel Forbes because he only played 14 out of the 17 games, and you might think it's because of injury. No, it was just bad performance. I think it was a case of Alek Manoah to where he just got in his own head, and as a result, it really hindered his performance. And now it's getting to a point where everyone's kind of losing faith in him. I mean, I think the highlight of when his confidence was at an all-time low was when he had to go up against A.J. Brown and just got torched. But I don't want to end this video on negatives. I want to try to bring in some positives. And I want to talk about Benjamin St-Juste because he had over 50 solo tackles last year. And I think that he is valuable on that defense. I just think that he's in the wrong position. I don't think that he's necessarily the best as a defensive back, but I could see him as a valuable safety that could even go in for blitzes sometimes. And then I do like Brian Robinson. I think that he is a really good football player. I think that he's a very strong running back, and he has that dog mentality. It's nice to know that he's able to focus on dodging defenders instead of dodging bullets. So, that's nice. And in 15 games, Robinson had over 10 yards per catch and 5 rushing touchdowns. The way I saw him play was that it was showing flashes of Nick Chubb. Of course, I'd be remiss without mentioning Terry McLaurin. I think he's the most underrated player in the NFL. Without Scary Terry, that Commanders offense would be worse than the Panthers. Almost 60% of his receptions were first downs. He would be able to make those improbable catches, and he was able to make over 1,000 receiving yards despite horrible quarterback play from Sam Howell. Despite cautious optimism, I think that some of the new hires, their job security will be at stake. I think a lot of people will jump the gun and be very harsh on them right off the bat. But with all that said, and trying to tie into ending on a positive note, I think that this year will be roughly 4 to 5 wins, and it'll be downplaying what the expectations were for some people, thinking that Jaden Daniels is just going to magically fix this team. I think that he is the solution, but it's going to take some time. And I think if people are patient with what is going on with the Commanders, then you could actually potentially see them overthrowing a team like the Cowboys. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it was entertaining for you and it was able to provide some insight on what to expect for this upcoming season. But I want to hear your thoughts. I want to have a discussion. I want to know if you thought I was absolutely wrong with some of my picks, if you could see where I was coming from in some of my picks. Just let me know. I want that interaction. If you're able to like and share this video, that'd mean a ton. I'd really appreciate that. But with all of that said, that's going to do it for me today. I'm Justin. This is Bleacher Buzz. Bye-bye.